Devin maintained his innocence, yet no one paid attention until the flaws in the case became undeniable. The courtroom was eerily quiet, making even the smallest sounds feel amplified. Devin sat at the defense table, hands clasped and trying to appear calm, although tension was evident in his jaw. The audience was packed with spectators, some familiar with him, others merely intrigued by the high-profile trial that captivated Austin, Texas. His family occupied a few rows back, with his younger sister Maya clutching their mother's hand tightly. At barely 20, Maya fought back tears, while their mother wore an unreadable expression, embodying quiet strength. They remained silent, aware that their words would hang uselessly in the tense atmosphere. Up front, the prosecutor arranged his notes with a smug confidence, as if the hearing's outcome was predetermined. The court clerk stood ready, poised to document every word that would soon determine Devin's fate. Suddenly, the heavy doors creaked open, and Judge Ronald Green entered, prompting the room to rise instinctively. Green was well known to law enforcement. He symbolized order and authority, but to defendants like Devin, he was a stark reminder of the justice system's ability to ruin lives. "Be seated," he commanded curtly, his voice slicing through the tension. He took his place, adjusting his robe with practiced ease, his expression neutral as he scanned the room, briefly locking eyes with Devin before turning to the documents before him. The charges were straightforward: armed robbery and assault. The prosecution claimed Devin had entered a convenience store late one night, brandished a weapon, and assaulted the clerk before fleeing with cash. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding him guilty. Now, only sentencing remained, which felt like a mere formality since the prosecutor sought the maximum penalty of 50 years. Devin barely registered his attorney's whispered words, fixated on the judge, silently urging him to look beyond the case file. He was not naive. He understood the odds were against him. His public defender had done her best, but the lack of solid evidence had been overshadowed by assumptions and a system eager to close the case. Judge Green cleared his throat and stated, "This court is convened for the purpose of sentencing the defendant, Devin Carter. The jury has found him guilty on all counts. Is there anything the defense wishes to say before I proceed?" The challenge hung in the air. Devin glanced at his lawyer, who nodded slightly, and then slowly stood up. He was uncertain if his legs would support him, but they did. Turning to the judge, he spoke with a firm yet calm voice, "Your Honor, I didn't do this," adding that he wished to explain why. The room shifted subtly, spectators leaning in with curiosity, while the prosecutor rolled his eyes. Judge Green's expression remained unchanged. He motioned for Devin to continue, his tone clipped. "You have 5 minutes." Devin swallowed hard, realizing those 5 minutes could determine whether he lost his life to the system or found a fighting chance. Unbeknownst to him, those minutes were about to transform everything. He began recounting an ordinary evening, one that seemed destined for routine exhaustion. After finishing his second shift at the shipping warehouse, where the long hours left him physically drained, he thought about the leftovers in the fridge and the few hours of sleep ahead before another long day. He clocked out at 12:07 a.m., the fluorescent lights reflecting off his gray hoodie. After waving goodbye to a coworker while walking to his old Honda Civic, he never made it home. As he turned onto East 7th Street, red and blue lights flashed in his rearview mirror. Confused but calm, he pulled over. The officer approached, demanding his license and registration. Devin complied, asking if he had done something wrong, but the officer remained silent, glancing at Devin's hoodie and speaking into his radio. Soon, another patrol car arrived, and Devin found himself surrounded. "Step out of the vehicle," the officer ordered. Startled, he hesitated, asking if there was a problem, only to be commanded again to exit. In a blur, Devin was pulled from the car, handcuffed, and forced face down on the pavement, the rough surface, and the smell of oil and asphalt overwhelming him. "You're under arrest for armed robbery and assault," the officer stated flatly, as if it were routine. Devin's heart raced as he protested, "What robbery? I didn't." But the officer cut him off, telling him to save it for the judge. The reason for his arrest became clear once he was in the squad car, staring at city lights that now felt alien and hostile. A convenience store just blocks away had been robbed an hour earlier. The clerk, recovering from minor injuries, described the assailant as a tall black man in a gray hoodie. Though vague, it was enough for the police. The evidence against Devin was weak. Grainy surveillance footage showed a hooded figure entering the store, appearing to brandish a gun and hitting the clerk before fleeing with cash. The footage obscured the man's face, but the matching hoodie and Devin's proximity to the crime scene seemed damning to the arresting officers. Devin tried to explain that he had been at work, surrounded by coworkers, and hadn't even clocked out on time, but no one paid attention. The officers dismissed his protests, their conclusions seemingly already drawn. Within hours, he was booked, fingerprinted, and placed in a cold holding cell, trying to comprehend how his life had unraveled so fast. When he finally met his public defender, the conversation was brief and discouraging. "You're facing serious prison time," she stated flatly while scanning his file. "This is a high-profile case, and the prosecution is going to push hard." Devin insisted that he was at work, urging her to contact a supervisor to confirm it. She sighed, replying, "We'll do what we can, but cases like this are tough. Juries tend to trust eyewitnesses." Before he knew it, Devin's trial was over. The eyewitness's shaky testimony convinced the jury, while the prosecutor portrayed him as a violent criminal. Despite her efforts, his public defender's limited time and resources left Devin's defense inadequate. Now, sitting in court awaiting his sentence, Devin replayed everything in his mind, wondering where it had all gone wrong. All he could do was hope that the truth would somehow emerge. What he didn't realize was that his voice was about to challenge the assumptions that everyone in the courtroom held. Judge Ronald Green, a seasoned veteran with 3 decades on the bench, had seen countless cases and defendants. To him, most trials followed a predictable pattern: evidence presented, a verdict rendered, and a sentence delivered. Faces and stories often blurred together. Green prided himself on fairness but knew the importance of maintaining order in an unpredictable world. As he reviewed Devin's file, his expression remained neutral, though his thoughts churned. The evidence, while thin, had been enough for a jury to convict. Devin had no prior record, but Green knew that good people sometimes made bad choices, leading to irreversible consequences. Still, something about this case felt unusual. The evidence, a blurry surveillance video, a vague eyewitness description, and a hoodie, seemed flimsy. Requests from Devin's defense team for employment records, GPS data, and other witnesses had been denied with little explanation. Green, though reluctant to question his colleagues, found the rejections hasty and dismissive, a symptom of a system stretched thin. As Green shifted his gaze to Devin, he noticed a quiet determination in the young man's demeanor. Devin didn't slump in defeat or react with anger. Instead, he sat upright, resolute. When the prosecutor began his final argument, emphasizing the lasting trauma suffered by the victim and urging the maximum sentence for community safety, Green acknowledged the statement but remained focused on Devin. Something about the young man's composure didn't align with the image of a hardened criminal. Turning to the defense, Green asked if they wished to address the court. Devin's lawyer informed him that her client wanted to speak on his own behalf. Granted permission, Devin rose, the chains on his wrists clinking as he stood. Though tall and broad-shouldered, there was a vulnerability in his movements. Locking eyes with the judge, Devin began, "Your Honor, I know this court has heard countless stories, but I'm asking you to listen to mine. I didn't do this. I've been saying that since the day I was arrested, but no one has listened." Green leaned forward slightly, his curiosity piqued, and granted Devin 5 minutes to speak. Drawing a deep breath and glancing at his family for support, Devin started. "On the night of the robbery, I was at work at a shipping warehouse on the east side of town. I clocked in at 4 p.m. and left just after midnight. The records are there to prove it." Green raised an eyebrow but remained silent. Devin continued, "I wasn't anywhere near that store, but the police didn't care. They stopped me because I fit a vague description, a tall black man in a hoodie, and decided I was guilty." As murmurs spread through the courtroom, Devin's voice grew stronger, cutting through the noise. "I told the police to check my phone records or GPS, but they ignored me. They just wanted someone who fit their narrative." He paused, scanning the room. "The prosecutor called me violent, but I've never been in trouble in my life. I've worked since I was 16 to help my mom keep a roof over our heads. That's who I am." Devin steadied himself on the table before continuing. "My public defender tried her best, but she told me this system isn't built for people like me, and she was right. I've been guilty in everyone's eyes since the moment I was arrested." The jury didn't hear the full story. "My supervisor was ready to testify, but no one called her. The surveillance footage from my job's parking lot could prove I was there, but it wasn't requested. The only eyewitness who identified me was pressured to do so. My mom spoke to her after the trial, and she admitted it." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Devin's lawyer handed a folded letter to the bailiff, who passed it to Judge Green. "This letter is from my supervisor," Devin explained. "She couldn't be here because her husband is in the hospital, but she wrote this to confirm that I was at work that night." Green read the letter, his face revealing nothing, while Devin stood quietly, his breaths measured. Finally, Devin spoke again, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "I know I'm just another case file to most people, but this is my life. I'm asking you to look at the facts, not just the story they've been telling. If I go to prison for something I didn't do, what does that say about this system and all the other people it's failed?" The courtroom fell into a heavy silence, the weight of Devin's words palpable. Even the prosecutor appeared momentarily shaken, fumbling with his notes as if searching for a response. Judge Green remained silent, his pen tapping softly on the desk as he processed what had been said. In that stillness, a shift occurred, a moment where the rigid order of the courtroom gave way to doubt, forcing everyone to reconsider what they believed to be true. Judge Green remained composed, his sharp gaze fixed on Devin as he leaned back and carefully removed his glasses. "Mr. Carter," he said evenly, "you've raised significant questions about the fairness of this case. However, the court relies on evidence, not emotion. If you have proof of these claims, now is the time to present it." Devin's lawyer stood, her voice steady but urgent, and explained, "Your Honor, we've been trying to present this evidence all along. Requests for Devin's work records, GPS data, and additional surveillance footage from his workplace were all denied before the trial." The judge frowned. "On what grounds?" She replied, her frustration evident. time constraints, and procedural technicalities. This case was pushed through the system, and key evidence that could have cleared my client was dismissed without review. The gallery murmured in disbelief until Judge Green silenced them with his gavel and turned to the prosecutor. "Mr. Aldridge, do you have anything to say in response?" The prosecutor stood, visibly defensive, and argued, "The evidence presented at trial was sufficient for the jury's unanimous verdict. The defense is simply trying to complicate the case with unsubstantiated claims." But Judge Green interrupted sternly. "Eyewitness testimony is not infallible, and if the defense was denied evidence that could exonerate the accused, this court must act." Tension gripped the room as the judge asked Devin's lawyer about the eyewitness who had allegedly expressed doubts after the trial. When Miss Ellis confirmed the witness was present, the judge ordered her to testify. A nervous Teresa Grayson, the store clerk who had identified Devin, stepped to the stand. She admitted that the police had shown her only one photo, Devin's, and pressured her to confirm he was the robber. "I was scared, and I didn't want to make a mistake, but now I'm not sure," she said tearfully, confessing she never had full certainty. Gasps echoed through the courtroom, and the judge's expression grew serious. He asked Teresa if her identification had been influenced by the police, and she admitted it had. The murmurs in the gallery swelled, and the judge let them linger before calling for order. Devin's case, once seemingly clear-cut, was now crumbling. Judge Green addressed the prosecutor firmly, dismissing the claim that revisiting evidence would undermine the trial's integrity. "What truly undermines this process," he said, "is the potential conviction of an innocent man due to overlooked or suppressed evidence." He granted the defense's motion to review Devin's employment records, GPS data, and workplace surveillance footage, ordering them to be submitted within 48 hours. He also demanded an investigation into the pretrial decisions and subpoenaed the arresting officers to explain why critical evidence had not been pursued. The prosecutor objected, but Green swiftly rebuked him, emphasizing that justice required thoroughness, not expediency. Devin's family wept with relief as the hearing adjourned. Although Devin remained in custody, the judge vowed not to proceed with sentencing until the case was reviewed thoroughly. For the first time in months, Devin felt a glimmer of hope. Over the next 3 weeks, activists and national organizations advocating for justice reform rallied around his case, drawing widespread attention. When the courtroom reconvened, anticipation filled the air. Judge Green reviewed the new evidence submitted by the defense, including employment records proving Devin was at work, GPS data confirming his location, and surveillance footage supporting his alibi. Additionally, Teresa Grayson's recanted testimony was taken into account. Finally, Judge Green announced the court's findings. The evidence conclusively placed Devin at work during the robbery, and procedural failures, including the mishandling of eyewitness testimony and the dismissal of critical evidence, had compromised the case. "It is the finding of this court that the conviction of Devin Carter was based on insufficient and flawed evidence," he said. "The conviction is hereby overturned, and all charges are dismissed." The courtroom erupted in cheers, and Devin's family wept with joy. For a moment, Devin sat in stunned silence before the relief washed over him, and he broke down in tears. Judge Green offered an apology on behalf of the court for its failures and urged Devin to use his second chance wisely. Devin, overwhelmed with gratitude, thanked the judge for listening and seeing the truth. As Devin left the courtroom a free man, embraced by his family, cameras flashed and reporters swarmed. None of it mattered to Devin, who was focused on the life he had regained and the opportunity to fight for others like him. This case sparked national conversations about justice reform, particularly regarding eyewitness testimony and evidence access. Devin became a vocal advocate for systemic change, using his story to shine a light on the injustices endured by others. His journey was a powerful reminder that justice must prioritize truth, fairness, and humanity, no matter the obstacles.